Hello and welcome to Dateline London. Is there just a week to save the euro? With predicted living standards flat or declining, was this a good time for British public sector workers to go on strike? And the increasing isolation of Iran. My guests today are Vincent Magombe of Africa Inform, Nabila Ramdani, the French-Algerian journalist, Toynbee of The Guardian, and Michael Goldfarb of globalpost.com. Well, the leaders of the Eurozone have been drinking in the last chance saloon for quite some time. Can the euro be saved? Will it be saved? And at what cost? Nabila, it's obviously a huge moment for Sarkozy and Merkel because it's really up to them, isn't it?
Yes, and it's very much perceived in France as the Merkozy roadshow because the idea is that they're carving up Europe according to suit their own interests. And I don't think we should be too surprised that these should be the two countries leading to try to guarantee the future of the European project as a whole, because let's not forget that these are two founding fathers of the whole thing. So.
But they come from quite different intellectual, philosophical standpoints, don't they, in terms of state intervention and whether you should bail out people and how you should do it. I mean, there's a lot of difficulties on the road to what appears to be fiscal union.
They certainly have their differences and they're not agreeing on everything, far from it. But they come from the same perspective. They're presenting themselves as the savior of the whole European project and indeed of the euro. So they are determined to guarantee the future of the euro. And I think Monday's meeting is going to be crucial between Angela Merkel and Sarkozy. The meeting with Cameron yesterday was downgraded as a working lunch, as we know, and not much was discussed really. And Cameron was very much sidelined, and in that respect, he didn't come across as a robust figure like Margaret Thatcher was. She was very capable of getting concessions from European partners to make sure that British interests are indeed preserved, and Cameron is not quite there.
Vincent, I mean, one of the things that it appears that the British government would like to talk for those who are not in the euro but within the European Union, but it just doesn't wash because other people don't want Britain to talk for them.
I think they're in real trouble. I don't usually use scare tactics, but I must say the euro is dead. I think so.
Really?
He's joining
I think it is,
Jacques Delors.
I think it is Jacques Delors and a lot of people in this country.
I think it's dead because if you hear one of the founding fathers yesterday saying, well, it was defective from the very beginning. I think what is happening is...
Thanks for telling us now.
Yeah, I think you are trying to combine so many different countries. It's like in Africa, trying to have one currency. And in this country, there's perhaps corruption, other people are stealing money here, or this and that. So you are having countries, some of them is completely unredeemable. I don't see how you're going to sort of solve the problem of Greece or Portugal and so on, just by trying to work out some quick mechanics of fixing the euro. I think the Europeans need to just understand that this is terminal, it's real, it's a cancer of complete failure of management, of finances and so on. I as an African and people perhaps from China and other places, there's a man who one time said a long time ago that there will reach a time perhaps when Europe and the West, their economies will collapse, and Africa and China and the rest, because we have all these resources unexplored. We just have to get democracy. That's all we need to get.
Well, I was looking at some of the growth rates for African countries, and they've been incredible because of
yeah, but seriously,
resources.
There is a big problem, I think, that cannot just be resolved by trying to maintain the euro. Let them just crush it and perhaps set up a new type of euro or just go back to the drawing board again.
Polly.
You can see the temptation of wanting to just crash it. You can see why, of course, you know, the Deutschmark should be rising sky high so they can't export anymore, and why all of the poor countries, the Greece and Portugal, should be allowed to have their currency back so they don't import anymore and they can busily manufacture, undercut Germany, undercut other countries. That makes sense. But getting from where we are to there means crashing the whole world economy and virtually every bank that has lent any money, that holds any euros. So it's even more unthinkable.
But
I mean, you might be right.
Isn't it just fear, really? Because what we fail to understand sometimes is that, you know, Japan is just one little country there doing its business. It's not in any financial sort of single currency with anybody. Many of these countries, you know, some of them will be weaker. They will have very hard times. Others, I don't think Germany is just going to collapse because the euro is not there. They will reorganize the economy.
You're awfully sanguine about 400 million people's future there. It's not the case. I mean, this is a situation of the unthinkable versus the unimaginable. If the euro collapses, and I until very recently thought that it just wouldn't happen, because I know the European Union, know the way it works. I've seen it at work in other areas, from diplomacy to more political union. They go to the last minute, they find a deal, everybody goes away happy or semi-happy. This is something entirely different. It is not possible to conceive of what would happen to the world economy if this thing falls apart in the next 90 to 120 days. And there are players in the bond market who are trying to make that happen. I think we have to see, I mean, this last chance saloon thing, it's both a cliche and an apt metaphor, because they do have, on Friday, coming Friday, at this summit, they have to present a proper plan as to how they're going to create fiscal union. I don't know what it is. I've been writing about this story every day for 2 months, and nobody knows.
You may not be alone, but at least you admit your ignorance on that.
They can buy off time, because within the bond market, this is what I've learned from reporting the stories, there are two key players in the bond markets. One are enormous institutional players who like to hold sovereign debt because it's a relatively safe bet. You don't get a lot of interest in return, but it's a safe place to park money. And then there are hedge funds whose sole reason for existing is to churn the market.
Well, that's been working, hasn't it? Looking at the way the market's gone up as opposed to gone down 2 weeks ago.
And personally enrich themselves. What's happened in recent weeks is people have begun to think that, yes, the euro will collapse. The big institutional players have parked their money elsewhere, including in the pound sterling, which is one of the reasons why the pound hasn't collapsed, even though the economy here isn't so great, and why British interest rates stay low. They would like to go back to the euro because it does, in theory, make sense for this area to have a single currency.
Merkel hasn't yet really spelled out to her own people. It's all real. We in Britain sit here saying, go on, Germans, pay for it. The Germans don't understand why they should. But she hasn't really properly spelled out to her own people why the Germans should pay, which is that they have been the huge beneficiaries. If there hadn't been the euro there during these years, the Deutschmark would be sky high. They'd be in real trouble. They wouldn't be able to be exporting as they are. Their currency has been held to their advantage and nobody else's, artificially low. Because of Greece and being tied to Greece and Spain and Portugal, it's done them good. And she has failed to really spell it out to her own people that all they'll be doing is putting back some of the money that they have made out of it. It isn't just a question of it's our money.
And I think it's important to highlight that we haven't heard any specifics on the plan to save the euro so far. And the kind of headlines that we have in the Telegraph today with Jacques Delors saying that we should, it was a bad idea from the start. It's very misleading.
He said it in 1992 when Maastricht was signed, right?
Exactly. He's been making this kind of couldn't care less statements for a long time now.
You should have listened to me.
It's very convenient to find a sympathetic ear with the Anglo-Saxon press at this time. I mean, let's not forget that in 1990s he was the bête noire of the Anglo-Saxon press.
Up yours, Delors.
In analysing,
and now he's become the cheerleader.
This council within the capitalist economy of Europe, and we're focusing on Europe. And we forget one great thing which many Africans and African academics and so on have been talking about from 70s, 80s. The whole pitfalls of the capitalist system as a whole. I mean, for example, for us in Africa, we really blame a lot of our problems, apart from the politicians, the leaders, the thieves out there calling themselves presidents. This issue of IMF, World Bank, their prescriptions for the world. In Africa, they have themselves today accepted that the prescriptions IMF and World Bank were imposing on African countries through the 70s, 80s, and so on, were part of the problem. They were completely wrong. Now, when I see this guy calling himself a Dr. IMF and World Bank coming to Europe, oh, we're going to give another thing, we're going to give another one, and this is the same person who has failed in Africa. I really pity the Europeans for trusting that.
The Europeans have taken the IMF medicine in a big time. It's going to be austerity for everybody, despite the fact we know, as you're saying, that is the calamity. Yeah. Mutual austerity is mutual destruction. It's as if the 1930s had never happened.
There needs to be a total reflection on how capitalist economies work and whether institutions like IMF and World Bank are actually relevant.
And Vincent, you're absolutely right, because this is the thing. Speaking of things that Angela Merkel should be saying, is here in the Anglo-Saxon world, and on both sides of the Atlantic, everybody's beating up on Germany and we won the war. What are you doing? Trying to run the world again? But they do have a model. They have a social market economy that actually managed to absorb East Germany, rugged few years there, but now an economy that fires on all cylinders. They should be saying, you know, we actually know how to make capitalism work through this social market model, and perhaps the Anglo-Saxons might want to try that. And you know,
if they
could be more
They're telling
positive.
everybody else to cut back their public sector. They're making everybody else take an austerity. There's no social model for Greece
well,
or Portugal
that brings
or
us
Germany.
beautifully on to our next item, which is many of Britain's public sector workers, including teachers and some medical staff, went on strike this week. Was the strike a sensible response to proposed changes to pensions? And with dire economic predictions for the years ahead, will we see more industrial unrest? Was it a sensible thing to do, to go on strike?
I think it was. I think, you know, it was a one day of action. It's not as if it was some sort of permanent rolling strike. I think they'll find it quite difficult to do very much more of that, to get huge numbers of people out. And it was a pretty impressive display. But I think when you see the way their pensions have been taken away, and the way the lies have been told about the pension situation, it isn't true that it's on an unsustainable trajectory. It's actually peaked, and the cost is coming down, not going up. They've already accepted working much longer and paying more. There isn't, for most of them, a pension pot. So when they're asked to pay 3% more in, it's just 3% off their wages. It doesn't go into a pool. So there is no reckoning of that kind. There's nothing to stop coming back time and again. These people are going to have a cut in their pay of 16%, which is much more than most people are going to suffer. So I don't think you can expect trade unions to say, well, we don't like it, but we'll put up with it. And I think a display was worth it. I think it aired the arguments. Will they win? No, probably not. It's very difficult to see how they can win. Trade unions are weak. The government is strong. People are too poor to go out and strike for long.
And we've got 10 years of austerity ahead of us, people say, so therefore it's going to be very, very difficult to persuade anybody to cough up more money.
It is, and I mean, the point that I raise is simply, does this kind of gesture strike really make a blind bit of difference? And other than making those who went out on strike feel good? And,
well, the Prime Minister said it was a damp squib.
Well,
was it a damp squib?
No, it wasn't a damp squib. If that many schools are closed, just the teachers, then it's not a damp squib. If that many operations were postponed, then it's not a damp squib. And if it was such a damp squib, I don't know what he was so hot and bothered about it. Prime Minister's question time. You should have just told Ed Miliband, you know, actually you're very nice, rather than you're weak and all the other nastiness. You know, he's usually very funny and witty, David Cameron, but at this last